If I Should Die by Donevy Westphal. Available through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other retailers. Chapter 19. Monday, June 15th. The next morning, Julius took his mug of coffee outside and sat under the maple tree, as the silent messengers of the sun appeared in the eastern sky. Mrs. MacDonald and Ruth, in quiet conversation, sauntered up along the path toward the house. "We'll have breakfast ready in a few minutes," Ruth said as they passed. "I'm just getting started. No hurry," Julius said. Mrs. MacDonald leaned her hoe against the side of the house, and they were swallowed up as the door shut behind them. The smell of the sausage and pancakes wafted on the breeze, bringing buried memories to the surface. The heartache and the yearning returned from the night before as he fingered his mug. He sighed and looked up as he heard footsteps on the path. "Hey," Michael said, "bring your mug inside and let's eat. It's about time to head to Lewis's." "Mind if I take some pictures while you hitch up?" Julius asked. "Do you get paid by the picture?" Lewis said. "I take a lot of pictures for this job." Julius checked the settings on his camera and snapped pictures of the wagon and some of the helpers while he waited. Watching Lewis bring the enormous matched pair of Percherons horses out and back them into their places, Julius wound up a roll of film. Changing the old roll for a new one, he stashed the old in his case just before Lewis raised his voice. "Listen up! While this information is for Julius, our greenhorn, it will serve as a reminder for everyone else. I drive the team, and we have a couple of stackers on the wagon. The rest?" Greenhorn, Julius thought without humor. If he only knew. Lewis finished his instructions, and amid light-hearted camaraderie, everyone climbed on the large wagon, jostling along behind the team of gigantic horses. Lewis pulled to a stop when they reached the field. Everyone slid off and fanned out to their places, except the designated stackers. "You up there? Come on, Dolly. Pete." Lewis shook the reins. The pair leaned into the harness. The steel wheels creaked, and they moved like clockwork as the tug chains jangled. The shouts and noises of men and beasts mixed in the mid-morning air. Michael and Julius jumped off and found a spot next to the bales. Michael readied one of his hay hooks as Julius drove the team toward them. "This is how you do it now, Julius." He swung his hook, lodging it into a bale and dragging it a short distance. And as the wagon started rolling by him, he launched the other hook, embedding it into the other side of the bale. Then lifting and with an easy movement, heaving the bale into the wagon. "Okay, you old city slicker. Let's see what you're made of," Michael shouted as the wagon rolled in Julius's direction. "This isn't my first rodeo either, city slicker indeed." Julius hooked the bale with one hook and drug it a short distance. Instead of using the second hook, he swung the 100-pound bale around with a single fluid motion. A precise timing in this dance makes all the difference in the delivery. And Julius, with a flick of his wrist, heaved his bale up onto the wagon. It landed precisely where he had intended, right at the feet of the first stacker. Chapter 20. "I think we should have timed hay loading and retirement center on 2 different days." "I'm going to rest for a bit while you get a shower and clean up," Mrs. MacDonald said as Julius pulled into the driveway. "I'm not as spry as I used to be." "What's wrong with you? You've only been up since 5:30 and it's now 1 o'clock. At 64, I hope I'm as ornery as you." Julius turned the engine off and brushed his fingers through his hair and beard. "I've got hay in my hair, in my shirt, and I'm going to have to hurry to get ready. What time are we supposed to be at the retirement center?" He looked at the clock as they entered the house through the breezeway. "You have half an hour. We want to be there by 2. Mrs. MacDonald opened the closet in the entryway and put her purse on the shelf. "I'll put my feet up and wait in here. Everything's ready to go when you are." Julius's sixth sense tingled. "That'll be fine," he called out, and then moved without sound, looking into the nooks of the rooms as he went. "What is it?" Mrs. MacDonald whispered as she felt his movements. She cocked her head to one side and turned slightly at the living room entrance. In the silence, Julius and Mrs. MacDonald stood a few feet apart. "Wait here," he whispered. Julius slipped out the breezeway door and, glancing down the driveway, he scanned the road toward town. There in the distance, the dark figure of a man moved slightly. In a flash, he sprinted back through the breezeway. The garden gate blew and lashed in the wind. The pea gravel crunched under his feet as he tore down the path and flew out the gate. Beyond the barbed wire fence, a man was running toward the end of the pasture at a goodly pace. If only Julius could catch up before the runner disappeared into the trees. He pushed his speed to the limit. He came to the fence and vaulted over it, but broke stride when he came down on the other side. The figure slipped into the trees. Good night. Now I have to get back over that blasted fence. During the adrenaline rush, vaulting over the barbed wire fence hadn't been a problem. Now without the adrenaline, the picture looked different. Jogging down the fence road toward a corner post with a gate, he heard a bullet being chambered. That sent a tingle up his spine and recharged his adrenaline. Julius changed directions at a dead run, zigzagging toward the trees. A shot rang out, something whizzed by his ear. He broke his running pattern just as another shot rang out. Dirt and grass spit into the air where he would have been. At last he reached the safety of the trees, and another shot rang out, again where he had been, spitting more dirt and grass. A surprise ball came from the trees, and the crunch of twigs, branches, and underbrush sounded as the body scrambled through the brush toward the road at the other side of the trees. Julius stood under the cover of the trees as the sound of a vehicle door slammed and a vehicle zipped away down the road. Examining the ground, Julius scattered around. Dropping to one knee, he studied the shell casings and wrapped them in his handkerchief. "That could have ended worse," he said as he returned to the orchard path where Mrs. MacDonald was waiting. "All's well that ends well, so they say," Mrs. MacDonald spoke from the cover of trees. Julius blotted the sweat from his face with his sleeve. That was close. "I should say, not many folks run at someone shooting at them. I left my stuff in my camera bag, but I won't be caught without my credit card again. I'll go get ready for a visit. Do you need to call someone? Do you know where those yahoos came from?" "They won't be back today, but I'll call Lewis. You wouldn't think out here we'd be troubled with this stuff. It's a sad day, and there went my nap. You'll have to hurry now." Julius pushed open the glass door, and they walked into the retirement center. "Hi there," a woman waved as they entered. "I'm just making the coffee. I'll be right with you." She repositioned the coffee maker. Mrs. MacDonald set her cake on the counter and went to speak to an older woman sitting at a table. Julius leaned on the counter. A few seconds later, the woman who had greeted them approached Julius. "With Mr. Mac gone on his mission trips, I didn't know if anyone would be able to come," she said. "They've been coming for close to 10 years now, and even though the MacDonalds are newcomers, nobody holds that against them. I'm Sheila," she held out her hand. "You related to the MacDonalds?" Julius shook her hand. "They're graciously hosting me for the short time I'll be here," Julius said. He watched as Mrs. MacDonald circulated around the room and spoke to several people before she sat at the piano and began to play some older favorite songs. The aides helped several residents to the lunchroom. Sheila took it upon herself to introduce the 5 women and 4 men to Julius. He took special note of the last 2 names. Charlie Anderson. What had Mrs. Irving said about Charlie? He was recovering from something? And Ralph Meacham. How was he related to Phil Meacham? And what had Ruth said about Ralph last night? Once everyone was settled, Mrs. MacDonald began to play old favorites, and several of the residents sang lustily along. "I'll have to come back next week for entertainment," Charlie chuckled. "I haven't had this much fun in years. How about I bring my accordion, Amanda?" "By all means, Charlie, come back and bring your accordion," Mrs. MacDonald laughed. "How long is that husband of yours going to be gone?" Charlie asked. 2 more weeks. Do you miss him?" She turned from the piano keys. Charlie guffawed and slapped his knee. Amanda, I was thinking I'm going to need some help when I go home. Maybe I can convince you to come and help keep house for me. This one was taken, Charlie, but you should have someone coming in to clean.